War is an algorithm. We will show its price. Every 72 hours, Russia launches a new wave of strikes against Ukraine's power grid. Each strike targets generators, transmission lines, substations, and district heating systems. The hardware is expensive. The damage it produces is staggering. But the true cost is not measured in the missiles themselves. It is measured in the decades of economic output that will never exist. This is not a story about energy. It is a story about economic warfare conducted through energy, deliberately, systematically, and with a cost structure that punishes the defender far more than it punishes the attacker. We are going to calculate exactly what that looks like. The scale of the target. Before 2022, Ukraine's energy sector was the backbone of a $179 billion economy. The country generated over 60 gigawatts of electricity. It operated Europe's largest nuclear power plant at Zaporizhzhia. It ran one of the continent's largest gas storage systems, 30 billion cubic meters of capacity. It exported transit fees worth over $1 billion annually, just for allowing Russian gas to flow through its pipelines to Europe. They said, Ukraine's energy infrastructure is resilient. Decades of Soviet-era engineering, redundant systems, geographic depth. They got a 70% increase in damaged or destroyed energy assets between 2023 and 2024 alone, according to the World Bank's fourth Rapid Damage and Needs Assessment. By the end of 2024, direct damage to Ukraine's energy sector reached $20 billion. The Kyiv School of Economics places total damages and losses, including lost revenue, at over $56 billion. 68% of pre-war electricity generation capacity has been damaged or destroyed. This is not collateral damage. This is targeted demolition of economic infrastructure. The asymmetry of attack. Here is the economic logic. A cruise missile costs between $500,000 and $3 million depending on the variant. A single strike on a major power plant can knock out 300 to 500 megawatts of generation capacity. Restoring that capacity takes 6 to 18 months, costs tens of millions of dollars, and requires specialized equipment that is difficult to source under wartime conditions. The ratio is brutal. For every $1 spent on the missile, the defender absorbs $30 to $100 in repair costs, and months of lost output on top of that. Russia does not need to destroy Ukraine's energy grid permanently. It only needs to destroy it faster than Ukraine can rebuild it. Each day that a major generation facility sits offline, the economic consequences cascade. Industrial production halts. Factories shut down. Aluminum smelters, which consume enormous quantities of electricity, go silent. Agricultural processing stops. Hospitals shift to backup generators, consuming fuel that could power other sectors. Every blackout pushes activity into the informal economy or out of the country entirely. The compounding clock. The World Bank estimates that GDP disruptions from electricity shortages alone will slow Ukraine's economic growth to 2% in 2025, down from the 4.8% recorded in 2024. That sounds modest. It is not. In a wartime economy already running at a deficit of 15 to 20% of GDP, every percentage point of growth represents billions of dollars in output that keeps the country functional. Unemployment has risen from 9.8%. The damage compounds on itself. Destroyed generation capacity means higher electricity prices. Higher prices mean more businesses shut down. More businesses shutting down means less demand for electricity, which, paradoxically, reduces the incentive to invest in rebuilding. The system degrades not just because of strikes, but because the economics of recovery become less attractive with each passing month. The nuclear dimension. Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant, Europe's largest, has been in cold shutdown since Russian forces occupied it in March 2022. 6 reactors, 2 gigawatts of generation capacity, gone from the grid for over 3 years. The IAEA has reported repeated incidents at the plant, including a February 2025 drone strike that severely damaged the Chernobyl nuclear power plant's new safe confinement structure. The risk is not hypothetical. A radiological event would not just destroy the surrounding region, it would render vast agricultural and industrial areas uninhabitable for decades. The economic cost of such an event would be measured in hundreds of billions of dollars, and in generations. The gas transit collapse. Before 2022, Ukraine earned over $1.2 billion annually in transit fees from Russian natural gas flowing through its pipeline network to Europe. That transit agreement expired in December 2024. Ukraine declined to renew it. The revenue stream is gone. Not reduced, eliminated. For a country borrowing $38 billion annually from international partners just to cover its budget deficit, the loss of over $1 billion in sovereign revenue is not a minor line item. It is a structural wound in the country's fiscal architecture. Meanwhile, European demand for natural gas has fallen 20% since 2021. The energy landscape has been permanently restructured. Ukraine's gas storage system, once a strategic asset worth billions, now operates in a market that has moved on. The reconstruction trap. The total cost of reconstruction and recovery in Ukraine over the next decade is estimated at $524 billion, approximately 2.8 times the country's entire GDP for 2024. Energy and extractives alone account for nearly $68 billion of that figure. They said, rebuild and Ukraine will recover. They got a reconstruction timeline measured in decades, not years, a financing gap of nearly $10 billion for 2025 alone, and an ongoing war that destroys new infrastructure at a rate that reconstruction crews cannot match. This is the trap. Ukraine cannot rebuild its energy sector while the war continues. The war cannot end while Ukraine's economy is being systematically dismantled. The energy strikes are not just a military tactic. They are an economic lock-in mechanism, a way of ensuring that the cost of continuing the war remains lower for the attacker than the cost of stopping it. Decentralization as emergency surgery. Ukraine has responded by decentralizing its energy system. Rooftop solar installations with battery storage systems have reached nearly 1,500 megawatts by early 2024. Small modular gas turbines, between 5 and 40 megawatts each, are being deployed across the country. Distributed generation is replacing centralized power plants. This works in the short term. It kept Ukraine through the 2024-2025 winter without catastrophic blackouts. But it is expensive, it is fragile, and it changes the fundamental economics of the energy sector permanently. The country that emerges from this war, if it emerges, will have an energy infrastructure that looks nothing like the one that existed before 2022. More resilient, perhaps, but also more costly to maintain, less efficient, and far more dependent on international support. The final calculation. Energy infrastructure destruction is not a side effect of war. It is one of the most cost-effective economic weapons available. The ratio of damage inflicted to resources spent is overwhelmingly asymmetric. The recovery timeline is measured in years. The cascading economic effects multiply the initial damage by a factor of 10 or more. Every missile that hits a power plant is not just destroying hardware. It is destroying future GDP, future tax revenue, future industrial capacity, future generations of economic output that will never be produced. Ukraine's GDP collapsed 28.8% in 2022. The energy strikes have ensured that full recovery will not happen within this decade. The $524 billion reconstruction bill is not a debt that Ukraine incurred. It is a debt that was imposed upon it, calculated in kilowatt hours and megawatts, in generators and substations, in the cold mathematics of economic warfare. War is an algorithm, and in the energy sector, the algorithm always favors the attacker. Subscribe to What War Costs, not for opinions, for the numbers that determine outcomes.